Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. I almost forgot where we were. I'm like, where are we? Welcome to... So today I'm going to touch on a subject that is sort of one of those things that if you can make this work for yourself, then you're good. If you can't, then it's maybe, potentially, useful for you to have someone recap sort of the consequences of this sort of lifestyle. Because let's just itemize life real quick. You remember when I told you guys that, in my opinion, the only thing that makes you compatible with another human being is your purpose in life. That's it. Everything else will fall into place. Whether you like spicy food or rock and roll or not or whatever, all that stuff will fall into place. Or it won't even matter once you find the right person. If your day-to-day churn is totally making you happy, then you're good. You don't need to do anything more than just maybe psychologically take this in and form your own opinions or what have you. I'm assuming that the value of this episode will probably not be for you. But like myself, you will know people in your life that do this, and you will have a little bit more thought process to digest it, perhaps better accept it, or, in extreme cases, maybe, stop hanging out with individuals as much, perhaps. Because our behavior influences each other. I'll give you an example. There's someone saying that something's good, something's bad around you a lot. And again, repetition is the number one way the brain accepts a particular concept or not. Then there might be someone who is more of a hermit, and you're more of an extrovert. And so if you're going to visit them on a regular basis, then you're not going outside, you're going inside. Now, usually most of us have a quiet time during the day, and sometimes that kind of person can be a wonderful person to visit because even though they choose to spend about 24 hours a day inside their house, their place, or whatever, you're only going to spend a few hours, and that's kind of what you want. You kind of want a little bit of personal time. But it might start out that you're only spending half an hour there. Then you start spending an hour, then 2, then 4, then 8. And eventually you lose your life and what is normally your package that makes you you. You start becoming someone else because you spend so much time with them. But this one's about living in the rearview mirror. And there's a big distinction between nostalgic thinking and living in the rearview mirror. Nostalgic thinking, typically, and I did a whole episode on it, it is visiting what perhaps we had right in the past, or just visiting a time in your life that has wonderful memories, that's all. But you visit it. You visit these things just about as often as you might visit Disneyland, if you didn't live next to Disneyland, let's just say. So a few times a year, maybe once a year, you reminisce about what it was like to be in high school, what it was like to get your first job, or whatever it is. Being a little kid, building stuff with Legos. That's why I think having children is hugely important, depending on what kind of person you are, because you get to hide your reminiscence and your nostalgia directly in the play that you have with your children. Hey, I don't play with Legos, but, I had to play with Legos because I have a grandkid and he or she likes to build things. So, I wouldn't normally be doing this, but, I got my duties. Meanwhile, the guy's thinking about the next thing he's going to build while he's at work, He has the grandkids over all the time, not only to see them, but because he gets to play with Legos. Living in the past, in my opinion, it comes in all kinds of forms, of course, but it would be that it becomes the majority of what you talk about. in the present, constantly reflecting to the past. And we have to be very delicate when we deal with these situations, especially me taking the position I'm going to take, which is, you got to really moderate that kind of stuff or you'll lose yourself and you will definitely eat up the time today, which you're never going to get back. Time is the priceless commodity of the universe. No one needs to really tell you that most of the time. But we do a lot of silly stuff that eats up this valuable time. Youth is something you never, ever get back. And you might be thinking I'm talking about playing baseball and running and jumping and doing things like basic training stuff. Oh, well, there's definitely that too. And if you love those things, you'll know that as you get older, you can break a hip at some point. But you can do something teeny tiny that might provide a bit of feedback that's positive, but the big macaroni that you really, really want never happens because, one, you're preoccupied with the past being your present. And so you don't conceive of what you would do otherwise. And there comes a point where you might end up inheriting a regret bubble. Regret is something you can never get rid of, is the true definition of it. So if you're able to get rid of a regret, then it's no longer a regret. It may not have ever been a regret, but maybe just a blemish in your own past that you were sad that occurred. But a regret is something you can never take back, that no matter how old you live, you can typically feel it just like it was yesterday that you got it. And what's really strange, the one that comes to mind, just flew into my head here, was I had an acquaintance I met in San Francisco. She was dating someone in the family. And she told me that her and her father took her to some outing or something in the car, and that they argued the entire trip. She was young and, like 14 or something, so she was putting a lot of value on being a little rebel. Of course, where did she get that from? Society. He drops her off. Then he dies on the way home in a car accident. And so, as an adult, she realizes, of course, my father loved me the entire time, and this is just a freak accident. But now the last thing I ever said to my father was something acidic and something mean. That's regret. Now, she knows if he's watching her, there's no hard feelings, but it's just a regret that the last thing you said was something negative instead of I love you. The rearview mirror species that I see is catalyzed typically by having had a great past, and then every time you talk to your friends, it's the only thing you ever talk about. Did I tell you I ever did this? Did I tell you I did that? And just normal conversation, not in some educational sense. The other one is the victim card from the past. You were perhaps, or they were perhaps, a victim of some real circumstances, like my grandmother in the Depression. Everybody gets betrayed in life. Everybody. Everyone gets betrayed every once in a while. Why? Because we set the wrong expectations. We rely on humans, and they are flawed. But this rearview mirror thing steals your future. Now, there's this weird line in the sand that we all struggle with, because we struggle with drawing the line in the sand ourselves, and then we struggle looking at others who haven't drawn the line in the sand yet. And that line is, okay, so some bad stuff happened to you in the past. Very sorry about that. I mean, genuinely, wish it hadn't happened to you. Especially if you can remember it in your present. And let's say you're over 40. Huge. Huge thing. But then you look back into your own life, and you've definitely got betrayal moments, bad moments. And again, it may not compare to the person you're talking to. They may have a more horrific moment. But at some point, there's this demarcation line in the sand that says, if you continue walking this direction, you have to qualify as an adult to cross that particular line. Otherwise, you're going to remain on the playground. You're going to have recess 3 times a day, not a whole day of school. And then once you get through school, you have to go out into the real world and get a job and do it. And unless you're treated unfairly, you got to nut up and do it every day. How many movies and stories have you heard where there's something horrible going on and someone's stuck in a cave, they're stuck in prison, something's going wrong and they're just stuck and they can't get their life back? True stories out of prison have these all the time. They did something bad in the past and they got themselves in a situation, or in the terms of miners getting stuck in caves, well, it's not their fault, just something fell in and the world is a dynamic place. And so we're watching this 2-hour movie, 3-hour movie, and the whole thing ends with usually, hopefully, a crescendo where the person achieves freedom. And we see them walk out of the prison. We see them go to the light at the end of the tunnel, literally. Maybe they're on some rescue rope, getting pulled out of a mining shaft. If they were hurt by a loved one in the movie and they feel horrible about it, maybe the loved one died at the beginning of the film, whatever. Then they meet someone at the end of the movie. And the past is over, and they move on, and we leave the theater as the uplifting music's playing, the credits are rolling, and it's like, oh man, I love that movie. It made me feel good. It took me through all the tumultuous struggle of a bad situation, and then the crescendo. We got out. Isn't it fascinating that people don't manage their lives more like this? When something bad happened, it's in the past. Sometimes it's so far in the past, you wonder how anyone could manifest it into their future. But it happens, and we have to respect that that's just how the brain can clog up bad news. And we're not talking about things like PTSD, which are, 1 in a million situations for human beings. Someone in a military vehicle, perhaps driving over an IED, that is so far beyond the average day event that we're not talking about, hey, get over it, man. That's not part of that. Go see my episode on PTSD if you care to see how I was taught a new technique to help with therapy on that. There's something about it that just, I don't know, it just seems disingenuous to being alive because the past is dead and gone. And again, visiting those moments and reminiscing about it, I completely 100% do and respect because, we're not to forget who we were. There's that famous saying, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. What I'll typically do, and I do this show, so I'm a little bit guilty of having to use all my life examples to make points and analogies. But I rarely, in daily conversation with friends, sit there and do that with them, unless somehow we're going down memory lane. Or someone wants to be mentored about, how to get a job in the video game business, and then I take them back to my past and we go through it simply as a way to work from bottom to top. But I don't just sit there and say, why don't you play the home movie where I did something amazing? And then let's do it next Saturday and next Saturday. I got a friend of mine, he plays videos of himself in band to his friends as if his friends drove completely across California to see that. Who does that? How many times are you going to show me your home movies of you popping a wheelie for the first time or whatever at some point and get over yourself? The weird thing about it is when you observe this behavior over time, you start to see the pattern or a pattern. I think it's the pattern, but it's constantly reminiscing about the past, either in a glorified way, which is sort of a bizarre conceit or conceitedness, or it is, I can't do anything really good in the future, or the present, because of all these things that happened to me in the past. And it's like, okay, Why don't you go tell that to the guy that went to Afghanistan, had both of his legs blown off, and then came back and joined the Olympics and did something amazing? Why don't you tell me all about that problem you got? Because how long ago was that? And what's strange is they think if they can just recreate the event more accurately in words, that somehow they can hang on to the teddy bear in the present. And you're thinking, what? What's really interesting about it is if you don't do this, but you have friends that do, especially the one where someone's trying to say something bad happened to them. And I mean, this could be under 10 years old, only one event. It could be a bad event, or up and up and up. It happened to me when I was 15. This thing happened to me when I was 15. It's like, well, did you have your brain replaced with a big manure pile? Because other than that, you can, it's back there. Isn't that a wonderful thing? You had a crescendo in the movie. You actually had a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it'll be about people that don't even exist anymore. Like they're dead and buried already. It's like, okay, move on, man. Find something positive to talk about instead of the past negativeness, because that past negativeness is not going to do anything for you. You respect their hurt. You respect their pain. And in some cases, these events actually stunt their growth. Imagine when you're young, people who are older than you are yelling at you. Let's just put it that way. Something real basic. And so as you get older, you can't listen to anyone older than you because they just remind you of this weird tyrannical world you were in, your own personal prison. And so you just have a jaded thing against people that are older. Or maybe you go into a weird Stockholm syndrome, and then you're like overly trying to repair the situation upward. Instead of just going, hey, you know what? My flesh is renewed every 7 years. Every cell in your body refreshes every 7 years. That was 20 some odd years ago. So I've nearly regrown my body 3 times since that happened. And time to move on. Try not to get a sympathy card out of people, right? Because I think that's a big one. It's some sort of thing. Like, I don't have to be responsible in life because I can always trace back to something that's ancient history. Some of us have a personality, and I'm definitely one of them, which is when something gets truly severely inappropriate, oppressive, abusive, if I can't just leave the situation, that's always my first recourse, just leave the situation. Like when I drive cars, people drive badly or once in a while, and hey, there's new people in town that don't know that 2-lane thing goes down to 1 lane. You got to be good because you don't know who's from where. Just chill out. But if you're in a situation, like I always told my employees, regardless of how much we need the client's money, if any of the client's employees ever get abusive, please escalate that to me so that I can push it over to management on the other side, or counsel them through it, or get it to the other side if it gets so severe we can't stop it, and then we'll just figure out where we go from here. And I was on to give you an example where I implemented this, I was on a call with one of our biggest clients, our multi-million-dollar client, and the product was getting close to launching. It was a big, big product. National brand. Kids were buying dolls and then pulling a tag off, putting it in a website and building like a Barbie world in there. It was big. It wasn't Barbie franchise. But we got on this conference call, and this woman who was supposed to be there, I can't remember if she was on time or not, but the chatter was kind of going back and forth. Oh, she'll be here anytime, and I was kind of like, well, what's the deal? And someone was like, they weren't willing to say it on the phone just in case they were listening. One of my producers just said, well, she's traditionally been fairly rude and blah, 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 blah. Now, I don't mind rude up to a point of getting the job done in case a bunch of employees are slacking off and then you just walk in a room and the person who's being quote-unquote rude is really just trying to herd cats, and the cats want to pretend like the substitute teacher doesn't know what the real teacher does, that kind of thing, which would be me. I'd be the substitute teacher. Anyway, this lady came on, and sure enough, man, it was epic. An epic moment in project management. I can't remember exactly what she said, but within probably 3 to 5 minutes, this woman was your classical alpha female, never had authority in her life, has no respect for other human beings. She's way beyond her capabilities to manage a project, in my opinion. And she is just being a bitch on this phone call. And so I stepped into the call and just tried to calm things down. And then she does one of these, I'm sorry, who's talking right now? It was even worse than that. It was even just sort of like, who the fuck are you to tell me what to do on this phone call? And so I told her, I said, I'm the fucking CEO of this game company that you're calling right now, and these are my employees. I said, I don't allow anyone to abuse my employees. I said, everybody here is with Zero G Games. You hang up the phone right now. That bitch was fired by the end of the night. I don't put up with that shit. So here's the lesson of why that little examples in this I was going to say lesson, in this monolith stone here called an episode. And by the way, those of you who got the finale of the intro, there's a special cookie for you. The reason why I'm bringing all the monoliths to Earth is that they're all lessons. They're all episodes. If we had all cowered down to this woman on that phone call, we would have installed most likely some minor PTSD into ourselves where we should have stood up for ourselves, but instead of standing up for ourselves, we cowered down and went back in and got some more. I find that for those that are abused, or either they were so young that no one came to their help, even if they were smart enough and brilliant enough as a young person to complain to the adults, and then their adult betrays them and stabs them in the back. Unforgivable, in my opinion. I mean, I got no problem driving a knife right in their fucking face, man. Just say, I'm never talking to you again. I'm sorry. You're a piece of shit human being. You didn't defend me when I was a kid, and you're no better today. See ya. I don't want to hear your voice. Sorry. I don't have any thumb I need to suck with your sound of your voice on it, man. So if you don't stick up for yourself, these events become more permanent and more damaging, in my opinion, because as you get older, you can stick up for yourself. If nothing else, I mean, it depends on if you live in communist China or something. As long as you live in a free country, you don't need a job if you're being abused. And I mean, make sure you're not being just a wimp. But as long as you know you're showing up for work and you're serious about things, you don't deserve abuse on any level whatsoever. And what'll end up happening is I think you will reforge these moments that are going to otherwise traumatize you for the rest of your life. And you will reforge them as moments of valor in your past. It will become the bedrock of which you build the rest of your home on, which is your life. And you can get drunk with that, so be careful. You can get to the point where you're just looking to be offended so that you can have another moment of valor. Again, be an alpha male and an omega female, and these things won't have any problems. If you're a really good, rooted human being, all you want to do is just get to the next amazing thing. And let me give you an example where I have yearned for the opposite in other people. One of the things that drove me nuts about being a Prince fan was that he could care less about the last album he wrote, even though it's the one that, it's the last one that blew my mind. He didn't like playing his old songs. When you asked him, what's your favorite song you wrote, he would say the last one that he wrote. And I always thought, that's so stupid. You have so many good songs. You can't say that. If you wrote a song better than your old songs, then you'd have a number one song every day. But now I get it as an older person. That was a very important personality trait of Prince, because if he had lived in the past, all he would make was the past. All of his songs would sound the same. And we would have drifted off a long time ago and probably called him a hack. Instead, he made every album sound completely and utterly different. And that's part of his legacy now. When I met Cool J once, I talked about, actually, you know what? I don't even think I said anything. It was when he mixed his first album over the internet, or first song or whatever. And he told me, he was just yelling at the room. He just goes, everybody wants me to go back and make the old stuff again. And he goes, I'm not interested in the past. I'm interested in the present, the future, I heard it again. And I was like, oh man, I sure would like to have just, 20 songs, drop one. It's kind of old. I need a beat kind of thing, right? Unless, well, let's put it this way. Unless you think you are the very best you could possibly ever be in every metric that you could possibly slice yourself into, meaning a mental superiority of your own making, meaning you're not better than someone else, is not what I'm saying. You probably are, but the idea is you haven't reached your apex of mental capability. Depending on your age, you may have already reached your physical capability, your apex. But then again, there's your apex for every age that you are. It's the apex for the present. Are you the best that you can be in the present? And I really try not to talk like that too much because, come on, that's a very stressful lifestyle. I got to eat perfect food every single day. I got to exercise every single day. I mean, your life would become a loop of trying to keep every little thing perfect across the top. That's not realistic. So you're going to have to do the old round robin. You've got several things and you're going in a circle. And at some point in the year, there's winter things that you do that you don't do because it's cold outside. There's summer things that you can do because you can go outside, so you're less inside. And so you rotate your schedule, rotate what you want. But now imagine, no matter what day it is out of the year, what comes out of your mouth is the same old story. It's a loop. And imagine you got like a Black Mirror thing, right? Where it's, you put those videotaped eyeballs in somebody. And then it's like, okay, if you ever repeat this stupid story of yours, there's some penalty. And you're sitting there going, oh my God, I have to live in the present now. I mean, imagine that. Imagine there was a Twilight Zone where a guy was a loudmouth at a gentleman's club, just talked incessantly. And I get a sense the actor wasn't like this in real life, but he did such a good job. And so a rich guy walked over to him and said, I'll bet you $500,000 that you can't shut your mouth for 1 year. Because I can build a little room downstairs. You get in there, it's got microphones recording constantly. So if you ever talk, we're going to find out. But you got to be quiet for $500,000. And the guy takes him up on the bet. In the end, he does it. And then there's some twists I won't spoil for if you haven't seen it. But imagine you flip that and you're like, you can't talk about the past outside of these little checkpoints in the video game. If you get to the little Mario Brothers flag in the building at the end, then you can kind of reminisce a little bit, because we all do. But this cannot be a daily churn of everything that you do. I got a buddy who bought a couple fancy cars in the last 6 months. I kid you not. He owns the car now. He drives the car every day. Whatever one he wants, he can drive either one of them. But he will go onto YouTube and watch just videos about the car that he owns. And you're sitting there going, let me get this straight. 30 feet from where you're sitting, the car exists and it's parked in the parking lot. You could actually go and get in it and drive it around in Southern California with the beach 3 miles. In fact, he's probably only 2 miles from the beach. Maybe meet a girl. Maybe just look cool. Maybe just feel some power. One's a Ferrari, for God's sakes. But he'd rather be at home or, whatever, and watching a YouTube video of the reality that he could actually go live. All right, tell me who's winning that game. I guess the Ferrari, because it keeps low mileage. I don't know. I have not found that my past helps me accomplish much in the future. Or the present, I should say. I should stop saying future. I haven't. You can You could maybe sit somebody down, you're smoking cigars, and somebody's like, what do you do? And you get into it, and who'd you work for? And if the guy's drilling, then we pull up some pretty fun stuff to talk about. But at no point at the end of the conversation does anyone go, well, I think I'd like to hire you for my job, hire you for this job, run my company, whatever. It's just as bad as the pathetic fucking website called LinkedIn.com. I hired you because of your profile on LinkedIn, said no one ever. It is a worthless use of your time. Let me tell you. Anybody who's using that, all they need is a PDF of your resume. That supplants that entire site. The rest is a bunch of liberals virtue signaling all over the place to basically prove on LinkedIn, I care more than you do. Oh, you posted that the kid dying of cancer. Well, I posted a kid with hydrocephalic condition. Therefore I win. That's LinkedIn. It's unbelievable, that place. With today's sort of disciplines as well, in the workforce realm, what part of your past is relevant today in the 21st century? Maybe if you made cigars for the last 40 years, blends, and you're a blender, or production pipelining or something, maybe you have value because that's just an art that doesn't change. But how many jobs are like that are left in the world? Even mundane jobs, you would be like, okay, I'm a blender. I've got 40 years experience. And the company goes, okay, we'll go over to that computer over there, and I want you to model the chemical composition of your blend. And the guy's like, what? No, I'll just smell the leaves. I'll smoke them. I'll figure out what the blend is. I know the farms. I know the rotations. I know how the rain came and didn't come and whatever. No, we've upgraded. We've upgraded into computers because that makes us feel important. So a lot of great, simple meat, potato jobs have been upgraded out of the capability of the individuals who normally do it for no reason whatsoever. But the thing is we always talk about loops on the outside, don't we? You go in these loops and your brain forgets them because they're useless to your memory. They have no point in being memorized. So as you get older, life gets faster because you don't remember, more of your reality. Well, let's go inside the mind of someone who is constantly trying to get a trophy for something that happened to them in the past. At some point, their brain is just simply waiting to find a new person. I love meeting new people. Well, me too. Some people like meeting new people because they get to say their story again. I've got multiple friends who do this. Well, I tell you, I did this, I was in the Air Force and then I worked for Disneyland and da-da-da-da. It's just like, hey, I'm really glad you did those things and I appreciate your service, but you already told me that. Oh, I did? Oh, well, let me tell you it again. I probably a story I didn't tell you. It's like, dude, I don't want to hear anything about your past. I didn't solicit your past out of you. That's not part of our conversation. What are you doing right now? Oh, gosh, what am I doing right now? I spent all my life inside the past. Now, here's the second half of this. If one loses the capability to forge the present because they are living in the past, what sort of future would you predict for them? What sort of future? Zero future. Downhill in terms of success, downhill in terms of happiness. Because, hey man, I don't know about you, but is the world getting much easier to live in? No, it's becoming so crazy that those of us that are red-pilled and awake, we're wondering whether or not this place will be free in 10 years, whether or not we'll even be alive in 10 years, right? I didn't make Agenda 2030. They did. I didn't write the zoning laws for human allowance in the 2030 year. They did. I didn't reduce world population 99%. They did. So you're telling me there's nothing to worry about? Forging the present? Fighting for the present? Becoming aware of the present? Not sure that works out. Cost of living keeps going up. Wages aren't going up. The simpler occupations that are out there are getting gobbled up because everyone's unemployed. So let's say there's a profession out there that it's sort of an entry-level transitional position that most people do before they get their big job. Whether we still need experts in those jobs that actually devote their entire life to those jobs. We do. Otherwise, it never perfects. It never goes to the next level. Standards are lost the second the great employee leaves and the new ones arrive that need to be trained. There's no one to train them. So all the mistakes come back. All the bad reviews for a particular business start to pour in. So it is important that these jobs are manned by individuals, meaning human. However, look at 2020. How many people are doing jobs that they would never normally do, not because they're too high and mighty for the job, but because that's the only thing they can do. And they normally do something much more sophisticated, making more money, but that company has gone on hiatus, gone out of business because of this fiasco that we're dealing with. So we know that life is becoming more dynamic by the minute, don't we? Meaning you can't just say, I know how to do computer science, so I'll always be employed and I'll always be a computer scientist. I was just talking to a guy today, sort of unrelated. There was definitely a barrier of being able to deal with reality in this conversation, which was, I was trying to make the point that because his kid was becoming a computer scientist and he was going to go into cryptology or some sort of security, which is great. And he has an artery to the military, which is good because that's where that career is going to thrive. And that's exactly what I told him. But I said, on average, becoming a computer scientist today is a joke. One, we get undercut by foreign countries. The second, that technology solidifies. And I said, whatever you know today is obsolete in a couple of years. Oh, they still program in it, but it's now being deprecated, and you can't possibly track all the languages that are out there. The guy was like, oh, man, I probably read like 12 papers a week or something like that on new languages, and it's like, dude, if you don't have a project in that language that you never programmed in, then there's no way you can be an expert at anything. You know how many languages I've read the white papers on, and it makes complete sense, but the second you actually need to use it, stuff don't work because documentation was out of date, or, hey, man, how do I talk to the I/O port on this computer? I need to suck some stuff off a USB serial port and do this special thing no one's ever done before. You have to have killer projects to learn something. I wanted to learn Blender 3D. I did that UFO thing, which was definitely challenging, but, man, the new intro was a ball kicker, man. I mean, it was, but I'm very glad I did it, and I'm still repairing that intro to this day. We can't simply say, to everyone at least, I think especially to females, because they're seeing things on a much more right brain dimension, that I think that men, we need to take a step back and accept that there's a genetic difference between the two of us. We obviously know that's the case, but I mean, there's a level of perception, I think, that happens with obviously every human being between each other, but obviously between male and female, where the male won't take in or allow in at least all of the elements of hurt that deal with a painful situation. Something bad happens. Men just tend to kind of lock up and we try to fight it out of our existence, or we just go, well, I can't make that work. Let's go do something else. And then we flush it down the drain. We just aren't typically the kind of people that carry stuff forward. The men, I have found, are more into positive past obsessions, and women are more involved with trauma past situations. So a woman will typically tell me, did I tell you this bad thing happened to me a long time ago? Well, and then they'll just dramatize it in front of you as if it happened 2 seconds ago. And you're like, wow, you really work hard to completely bring back this horrible moment in your life, and why would you do that? What benefit is it to you to relive something maybe physically traumatic, mentally traumatic. Why would you do that? PTSD is a different thing. PTSD is an event, a traumatic event that's lost in the consciousness of a human being. That is, you feel horrible as if it just happened to you, but you don't remember why you feel horrible, and you don't remember that it happened to you. And so you have to go search it and find it. And once a guy finds it, he kills it and it's gone. Those are the successful PTSD things. And even if there's a little morsel in there where you're like, I can't quite remember, but something weird happened right there, you just go, well, I feel better that I know it's there and that was nagging at me, and now I can just ignore the nag. But at least I know where it came from. I got friends of mine that have come to me, or we'll just be talking, and they'll say, I think my uncle might have touched me when I was a kid. And I'll say, okay, well, I'm very appreciative of you sharing that with me. Why do you think that? And, well, he kind of chased me around one time, and I think he had all of his clothes on and stuff, but I can't remember him doing anything, so I'm not going to let it really affect me today. But the more he was thinking, maybe he'll recapture the memory. But at no point is that guy who told me that story going to be going in for a job interview and be thinking about his uncle touching him and whether or not that happened or not, and then tank at the interview. He's going to man up and do it. The other one, though, is to overcompensate. And I mentioned this a million years ago, but we had a woman come into Electronic Arts. I wasn't introduced to her. She just literally showed up at a meeting. And I think her thing was, I think she was maybe in marketing or something. She looked great. She looked amazing, really professional, super professional, almost too professional for a video game company in one way. But I was always very happy when that DNA came in the company, because I'm like, good. We need a little bit of that DNA, just a little drop of like super professional corporatism inside of this crazy place with all these kids with candy bars in their back pockets, But she came into this meeting that we were having, and it's a co-ed meeting. I mean, EA was pretty good about hiring, at least in the internet division, lots of females, lots of males, and very powerful positions for both. But she stopped the meeting during the introduction of herself and went on this little rant to let us all know in the room, and even talking to the women as if they were involved or genetically capable of doing this. She said, something to the effect of, she's here. She wasn't in any senior position. I was over her a couple levels. But she was like, and I'm not going to let any men tell me what to do. And it was just one of those kind of San Francisco liberal monologues. And I was so like, I remember looking at her like, gosh, like 60 seconds before you went on this crazy rant of yours, I thought you were going to be one of the coolest people that just joined the company. And now I think you should leave. In my brain, I was like, uh-oh, we can't keep this DNA in here, because this is like a woman on the edge. She's just ready to sue the company for some, I don't know, discrimination or something on probably our third day. However, to her defense, here she is utterly paranoid, schizo-paranoid about being repressed by men. Her division needed its own server. But real quick story, she asked for a server. It was taking a long time because the IT group was just backed up trying to literally put together hundreds of servers and do a big disk array and all this other stuff. So she makes a phone call to one of the guys, who's one of the nicest guys on planet Earth. Definitely respects women. But he had a busted flip phone that when he shut the phone, it wouldn't actually kill the call sometimes. And so she left a voicemail with him. Hey, it's been about so many days, and I think I should have my server by now. Could you please fill me in? So he calls her back to leave a voicemail in a room full of men, and leaves her a real pleasant voicemail that, hey, we're working really hard, should have you up by next week or whatever. And then he closes the phone, and then he makes a joke across the table. Yeah, you'll get your server, probably next year or something, or whatever. I don't know what he said. But anyway, everyone laughed, and that was all going into her voicemail. And so she attracted the future that she wanted. She wanted to be abused, and that's what she got. Am I blaming her? No. But if law of attraction is true, maybe a little. Thing is, you can't go to a football game and then just stand on one side of the end zone and then accuse the other side. Well, you better not play dirty. You better not play hard, and then they're just going to go, oh, okay, I guess we won't. Hey, don't hit so hard. Okay, guys. No, life doesn't work like that, does it? You got to get up. You got to punch life in the balls and run past it while it's been over. That's what life requires in the world that I have seen. If you're able to live a privileged life where nothing bad happens to you, you married your high school sweetheart, you live in your hometown, money's been rolling in, you got 4 kids, your parents are 80 years old, probably going to live to be 120, you're an anomaly. And that's a wonderful thing. The world envies you. But considering that most of the people live in these demonic major city areas of the world, I don't think the majority of the world has that privilege, nor the knowledge of what that experience even feels like, or that it's even possible to do. Part of not living in the past is you got to hustle your present. At the same time, you can't let your past keep the bar at the bottom, right? Oh, I guess I'll just do this minimum thing I can do to exist. Well, gosh, we're literally, there were episodes, I hate doing this to you guys, but there were episodes of Twilight Zone in the 60s about machines taking over all employable work. And we have now got Boston Dynamics robots running around, climbing on junk piles, pulling dummies out of fake earthquake simulations. And you think that your job is secure? Okay, so if you're 99 years old and your little putter in your chest is starting to end, I get it. You've been retired for 20, 30 years. I get it. But if you're young and you're vibrant and you're going to need a job in 10 years and you don't have any money in the bank for retirement or whatever, and you're not quite sure whatever Social Security kind of program you have in your country is going to work, they're depopulating the frickin' world, so what youth is going to put money into a system to pay you to live? China just figured that out. Japan just figured that out. America just figured that out. And the thing is usually as you get older, your physical capabilities start to deteriorate. So depends on what your vocation is to get you into whatever job. Maybe that job, all the jobs that are at the low end level because you keep setting your bar low and you're not going anywhere. Maybe you can't physically pull off the jobs that are left. And then what? You're going to find a place to tell people your past? Is that really going to knock it out of the park for you? It's not going to do anything. It's going to guarantee there's a ditch with your name on it. Again, I think I'm talking to people that know people like this more than people that do this. This is one of those conversations that in my hometown would typically come out of like an uncle that has been through the machine. If you're from a little town, it would be the uncle that moved to the big city for 20, 30 years, did something fairly significant or whatever. I mean, in terms of pain and just toiling great things into the world. And then they come back. They're talking to their nephews, their nieces, and they're mainly nephews because there's usually an alignment. The aunts talk to the nieces and the uncles talk to the nephews. But they hear your idealistic approach from a child, let's just say. And they let it all come out, and then they ask a couple questions, and then they just turn to you and then just mow you down and give you the real deal, man. My cousin / he's really my cousin, but I call him my Uncle Larry. He's my dad's age, my dad's first cousin. You know, I did an episode called My Cousin Larry, or Cousin Larry, because he passed away, I think, way ahead of his time. But he was listening to me talk about how I was going to leave California, go to the Midwest, and go to college to get certified in what I already knew. Here I was, lead engineer, lead designer. I pounded out a bunch of wild stuff and had my own companies, and all of a sudden I'm talking about this thing. And I think I was about 23 years old. And he listened to me. He listened to me all the way to the very end, and he always had this enchanting smile. And he put a big smile on his face and he said, why are you going to college again? I said, well, because, some companies need to see the piece of paper. And he looked at me, and I'm just paraphrasing what I remember he said, but he said, well, do you really want to work for anyone who doesn't trust your background, who doesn't trust the interview process? And he goes, aren't you doing what you already love to do? And I was like, yeah. And just within 5 minutes, this dude canceled a huge plan that I had to move. I mean, it was a big deal. I've been in California, I guess, about 6 years at the time. And he kept me here. And because of him, he infused in me new confidence in my present. He also helped me build confidence from my past, right? So you button up your entire past, and it becomes literally the voltage rating on the battery. And so I went off and more confidently conquered my future because of my past. I knew where I came from, so I knew where I was going or where I could go. Now, let's go back and review the couple species I put together as a more advice-bound conclusion to this sort of thing. It's a hell of a thing to tell yourself that the greatest things that you have created in your life or accomplished in your life are strictly in your past. Meaning, okay, to the degree you worship your past. I got guys watching videos that happened 30 years ago, like it happened yesterday. 30 years ago. So what have you been doing in the meantime, man? And what could you possibly do with your present if all you do is keep looking at the past and with no interest to actually engage the past in your present? So maybe you go back and you're like, man, when I was in my teenager, when I picked up a guitar, I just wrote a song instantaneously. I'd take it down to a local club and play it, and people loved me, and I made lots of money. Maybe I should pick up a guitar again because maybe I still got that talent. That makes sense to me. Instead of just going, have I shown you the tape of me playing at the bookstore that one time? Ping! And it's the only thing good that ever happened according to your own perception of yourself, not our perception of you. If we're your friend, there's something happened in the present that makes us like you. So let's say something really bad happens to you in the past. Usually, the way I've seen this is that if the conditions of which the past occurred and tortured you, I'd say to the degree that those events can happen again in the future or / present, I get the psychosis. Let's say you're walking out of a grocery store and a pervert, rapist, whatever, follows you to your car. If you're a guy, it's just someone want to knock you on the head and steal your money, maybe even kill you. And you got held up at gunpoint. But those events of walking out of the grocery store are going to happen, meaning just the innocent event of you walking out of the front door, going to your car, packing your stuff up and going. You want to go in daylight, but I mean, Ted Bundy worked in the daylight almost categorically. There's no safety in some of those situations. But if the conditions that tortured you in the past are constantly coming up, I get the fear. And something needs to change. Something needs to change to break that loop. You either have to go with someone else every time you go to the grocery store for a little while until you break it, or you order stuff online, do something different to break those circumstances. But I've never heard that be the case in the examples that I have seen. They were very, very unique situations, some of which, because these people are no longer children, it can't happen again. It can't happen again. I've heard of stories where, boyfriends have been abusive for a really long time. Just one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. And part of it's like, doctor, it hurts when I do this. And you go, stop doing it then, right? That is why I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you need to make sure that abusive behavior towards you, and that's your definition, that's not anyone else's definition. Now, if you're made of marshmallows, you'll probably die alone because everything's going to be too harsh for a marshmallow. But believe it or not, there's some marshmallows out there you can hang out with. You may not respect or be attracted to them, but that's sort of what you got yourself into if you're too malleable and too sensitive to exist in the real world. But sometimes people are completely normal and people are just jerks to them, physically, mentally, or both. Well, how many times do you need to get punched in the face before you go, hey, I don't really like getting punched in the face. It's pretty traumatic physically. It's pretty traumatic mentally because I feel defeated. And so I don't think I'm going to get in a situation where I want to get punched in the face. You say la vie, man. Now, if you're Richard Harris or you're Gene Hackman, then yeah, you do go to bars to get into fights and you love it. For whatever reason, those two dudes were just soccer thugs, man. They dug it. But both of them grew out of it eventually. That's just some weird latent rite of passage or something. I don't know. But I don't think they're complaining about it. Now, if someone is like a retired Top Gun pilot, a retired actor, musician, and they're simply not doing it anymore, maybe little flyouts here and there, but and they're celebrities and they go on television shows, radio shows, podcasts, or they're just an interesting person, and someone wants to ask Keith Richards what it was like to be Keith Richards. I get that. But I think what you'll find is if you were alone with Keith Richards, he wouldn't mention the past unless it had some sort of educational example or alignment with what's happening at that exact moment. Imagine sitting on a porch with Keith and you're drinking some whatever and you're just watching traffic go by. And some weird red van comes by or something and he goes, oh man, look at that old van. Man, we used to have a van like that when we first went on tour, man. That's really weird. I haven't seen that in a really long time. There you go. He's just reminiscing about something that happened in the present, and it's not a negative, it's a positive. But what if I brought Keith a situation that happened to me in the present, and I said, man, this dude was business went bad, or I'm just struggling with my chick or whatever, and he's done it all thousands of times, right? And he searches his brain. He would be my deep thoughts at that moment, right? He'd go, well, it sounds a lot like this. Maybe he's thought about it so much because he writes lyrics too. He boils the whole thing down to just some little epiphany that I need to hear, a piece of wisdom I need to hear. Those are wonderful things and not what I'm talking about. One of the heartbreakers I run into all the time is that people fixate on past styles and past clothing. I mean, like we talked about this a long time ago, where you'll have your friends on Facebook profiles that actually still post a photograph of them in high school or in college, and it's been 30 plus years since that was an event. And so you're sitting there going, really? What music do you listen to? Only the past music. This is the only music that's good. Amen. Believe me, I understand that. But to be completely disconnected from everything, if you love music, to disconnect from some of the great bands that are coming out that do sort of reprised versions of previous styles, or they're real one-dimensional, that's your choice. You can do that. I love to find some eclectic, like Mode Selecta, some amazing band that's just phenomenal. And they come and they go. They'll make a couple great albums and then disappear. But for that moment, you're just listening to something that's just out of this world. Berlin techno, man. I mean, it's just amazing. There's that famous saying, I think it was a Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is one guy that made it really popular, which is your past does not equal your future. But man, I would be hell-bent to convince a few people I know that that's the case. I think one of the formulas in closing here is trying to use it's to establish credibility in the present. Now, there could be points where even I do it, because for me, it's super duper rare, other than this show, which is a weird irony of the whole statement I'm making here. Like if you talk to some of my closest friends and ask them about like what I've done, you'll get some little tiny pieces of my past out of them. But if you're a Deep Thoughts listener, you know more about me than most of my friends in terms of my overall history with the universe. Because I just don't do that. I just don't throw it out there unless it becomes part of the conversation. It's relevant to establishing capabilities. And then I'll pull it out, lightly. But one of the things, for instance, that has always plagued my mind is when you're because I talk about joining these groups, right? These people who want to think tank things. And there's always that intro Zoom call or meeting or whatever where they want to go around the room and have you talk about just a little introduction of who you are. It used to be that when someone asked me what I did for a living, it was the worst question in the world because it was like, how long do you got, I just dreaded the answer because at one point it just feels boastish. It almost, for me, it's like a millisecond into talking. It feels like I'm bragging, and I know that's not what's happening. And I didn't feel like anyone else was bragging when they talked about what they did, usually. But it just makes me want to puke when I have to go through that whole thing of like, and I did this and I did that. And because part of it is, well, are you any good today? Whether or not you were amazing in the past, it should be irrelevant. It does establish your ability to gain responsibility and to mitigate, obstacles and that kind of thing. But I'd almost rather have an employee tell me, potential employee tell me, look, here's the thing. I have a really strong work ethic. I work 7 days a week because I love it. I don't think that anything is impossible. I've been entrusted at the managerial level many, many times. I've had this many employees in my past at times, did really, really well. And I'm just almost giving you the verbatim answer that would work for me more so than the resume. Now, I may ask them a couple key questions to say things like, what's the most significant thing in your mind that was, the most interesting thing you ever worked on, and perhaps one of the most complex things you ever worked on? It could be 2 answers. It could be 1 answer. Go. And you'll see their face light up because all of a sudden now they have one of those things. And I think that's lightning in a bottle, man. It's beautiful. I don't think you can get those answers out of people or out of yourself if there's a predominant focus towards the past, because then the answer becomes, once upon a time in a galaxy long, long ago and far, far away, this thing happened. And so it's kind of like, well, I know a lot of guys that were amazing at between 18 and 25, but at 26, they, let themselves go. Let's just put it that way. It's who you are right now that matters, and that's all that matters. Be careful with who you hang out with because you need to be aware of how much it's affecting you, both consciously and subconsciously. If you are striving to be your best, or if you are in a dire situation that you need to get yourself out of, and I'm just saying that because of 2020, we've all had to come out of our slumber of comfort. For those of us that had to change our careers to make sure that we have the same kind of money that we enjoy. It's not, as much as you might love it and find success in it and whatever, it's still not intuitively comfortable. And so that's one reason why I wanted to kind of loop in on this. This has been something kind of nagging at me as I sort of live in other people's loops constantly. And I'll hear some people complain about their lives. I mean, just not a positive statement out of their mouth about their lives. They're always tired and God, life sucks and business sucks and just man, picking the worst second next constantly. And then there are others that are bright as can be, but still can't stop talking about the past. And it's like, why wouldn't you want to talk about the present? Because a bunch of great things are happening right now, right? Oh, yeah, totally. And then all of a sudden, boom, you get this story about the present that is a true double entendre. It is a present to hear. So anyway, that's all I got on this one. A little short episode for you. please go to deepthoughtsradio.com and bookmark that. Please get to bitshoot.com and create yourself an account and subscribe over there. It is the replacement for YouTube, at least one really good one. LBRY is also blowing me away. I've been perusing that a little bit. I don't think anyone's watched a video over there, but they don't have any metrics to know that that's happening, so they could be watching it, I don't know. But it's got everything up there. The only thing I'll mention is Patreon folks, thank you so much for supporting the show. You're truly making it happen. I mean, these shows monetarily are all worth hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars a piece when I total up my normal average pay for how much I spend on every episode. But you guys facilitate things, make it happen. So I appreciate it. The new format I'm trying to go to in terms of release schedule is I will put it out the night before to the Patreon folks, and then they get a chance to watch it for about 12 hours, if not more. Actually, probably about 16 hours beforehand. And then it goes out between, again, 12 and 2. So anyway, hopefully that's cool for you guys. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.